All right, this is number 5. Welcome to another Anyone Can Play Guitar video, the last in this major scale series. So here we go. We started on the 5th note of the major scale in the last video, and we did that even though it's the 4th pattern. We started on the 5th note because we talked about how playing a scale, starting one of our scales shapes from the 4th note of the scale would overlap a lot of what we already did, pretty much all of what we already did for the 3rd pattern. So we just skipped up the neck a little bit to the 5th scale note D. Now we're going up to the 6th scale note, and it's the last pattern. So that means that we also not have a pattern that starts on the 7th note. And that's because the 7th note, as we saw in pattern 1, includes this note. It's already there. So starting a pattern on that would put us in the same exact position. Alright, so to finish it off, pattern number 5, we are way up here. If we've been playing in the key of G, we are way up here on an E note, the 12th fret in this case, starting with our 1st finger. Alright, so this is gonna have a shift in it, as well as that index to pinky move that we saw earlier. So we have E, F sharp, G, there's our 1st octave, root note, A, B, C, D. Alright, now here's where we use our pinky. So D, E with the pinky, and that allows us to go to the next string more easily. So we had D, E, F sharp, G, there's our 2nd root note in this pattern, A, then we shift, so again we can't just go straight across because that doesn't give us the note we need. We have to go up one, so G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So we have a root up here on our 1st string as well, in this case on the 15th fret, which is our G. So we have a G on the 6th string, the 3rd string, and the 1st string. Alright, so to recap all those root notes that we've been paying attention to, back in our pattern 1 we saw roots on the 6th, the 4th, and the 1st, and then the one on the 4th was part of the 2nd pattern, so we had roots on the 4th and the 2nd. The one on the 2nd was part of the 3rd pattern, which has roots on the 5th and the 2nd. And then the 4th pattern had roots on the 5th and the 3rd. And then our final pattern has roots on the 3rd and the 1st and the 6th. So in this case, the 6 and the 1 are the common notes for this pattern here. That's how it brushes up to the next back to the 1st pattern, which means that if we play our 5th pattern, we're running into this G, and way up here you can play pattern 1 again. So what this means, and it should be pretty mind-blowing and wonderful, is that by learning these 5 major scale shapes, you can now, if you've worked on them, play your major scales across the entire neck. So each pattern interlocks with the pattern before and after it to cover the entire neck. So once you get through with your 5th pattern, you're ready to start the 1st pattern again in a different spot. And that's where those knowing those roots comes into play, being able to visualize where these shapes are as you go through different keys. So this was huge. Because this is the starting point for everything else. Talking about so these are all major scales, but built into them are actually all these other scales, these different modes as they call them, including the most popular one, which would be the minor scale. So we will look at modes another time, but the first thing you got to do is get these patterns down. So keep doing the same exercise, pulling out a random key each day, working on your pattern. So now you've got, at this point, 5 patterns, so try playing them, playing all 5 patterns. Pull out the key of A, play every single pattern in the key of A. And so what will happen probably, especially if you're on an acoustic guitar, maybe that doesn't have the cutaway, is that you'll run out of room, right? At a certain point it'll be hard to play, or maybe you're starting way up here on C and you're just going to go up and then you're actually going to run out of frets. So that's where knowing your notes, knowing the root notes will help you, because not all of them are going to fit so nicely across the entire neck like the G scale did. We had plenty of room to play the whole thing, but if you started on, say, D, then your first pattern, second pattern, third pattern, fourth pattern, running out of room, fifth pattern, I don't even have enough notes. So I have to be able to say that that's a B note, and that's where I can start my, I can go down an octave, physically down on the neck to a position where I can play that. So that's the kind of thing, you got to play those in different positions. And then, of course, we have open strings on the guitar. We haven't been covering those, but there will be times when whatever key you're trying to play, the note where you would normally fret ends up being an open string. And so that's a whole other thing that you kind of got to get used to. It's not necessarily worth sitting down and trying to figure out every possible permutation that includes the open strings. Once you get these 5 patterns down and you have to play down in this area, you won't have to think about that quite as much. You'll be able to see in advance that your fingering doesn't have to be quite the same as the pattern, because it has these open notes in it, and you'll be able to just substitute fretting a note with an open note. All right, so if you have the ability to record yourself playing chords and like loop that, if you've got GarageBand, or if you've got a looping pedal, or however else you need to do it, I encourage you to, in this case we were playing in the key of G, so play some chords in the key. So play G maybe, C, D, all these chords work really nice, and just kind of make a rhythm up. Play quarter notes if you want. Make up a chord progression in that key, and then whatever. So what I'm doing there, I mean, you can just run the scales over the key, over those chords, which would be perfectly fine. But also try improvising with it, hearing how different notes of the major scale harmonize with the different notes of the individual chord that you're playing. You don't have to worry about analyzing right now. It's all about just having fun and getting used to hearing these sounds. And I think you'll feel, especially if you're interested in being able to improvise, make up your own melodies or songs, or just jam. This is where all that stuff comes from. Knowledge of these scales will open that huge door for you. And then there's all kinds of other stuff that you can do to supplement that and expand that knowledge, but that's the core, that's the basis for everything else that comes after it. Just like we saw with our theory, we looked at the scale, and then from the scale came all these chords and all these other chords and all this kind of stuff. So now we're looking at just the actual playing side of that thing. All right, so thank you for watching. Take time with this. Again, I did this in separate videos because I want you to take your time. Just don't blow through these. Make sure you've got them memorized, and not just in one key. Don't just play the key of G. Play them in all the keys. You hear people say that all the time, and it's absolutely true. Don't let any scale spook you, right? Tackle it. Take the time to figure out the notes, and after you do a handful of them, it gets really easy, right? You'll be able to name the note, find it on the guitar, play all 5 patterns, and boom. Then next time you're hanging out with somebody and they're like, hey, let's play a song, it's in the key of D, you go, bam, you start to play. You just can play because you know what the key of D is, and you know the notes of the scale, all that kind of stuff. All right, so yeah, thanks for watching. Leave any questions or comments in the comments, and take your time with this stuff. And thank you for tuning in. I will see you in the next one.